The Wanderer sliced through the upper atmosphere of Silkshade like a knife through thick velvet. Its hull bore the burns and scars of countless re-entries, a testament to the life its pilot had lived, one of restless movement and hard-earned survival. Inside, Louie sat strapped into the flight cradle, his gloved hand steady on the controls, his gaze locked on the indigo clouds swirling below like bruises across the skin of the planet. The ship groaned as gravity caught hold, the artificial dampeners humming to compensate, and a faint smile ghosted across his face at the familiar sound. This part, the descent, the unknown, had always been the closest thing he knew to peace. He didn't speak. He rarely did when alone. His voice was a stranger to silence, and he had learned long ago that in solitude, even breath could sound too loud. The mission was simple on paper. Follow a signal. Retrieve what no one else could. Extract. Get paid. But nothing on Silkshade ever felt simple. The name alone spoke of shadows and silence, and as the ship punched through the last layer of cloud, Louie finally saw the planet below. It was a world trapped in perpetual dusk. Trees that resembled towering fungi stretched high into the violet sky, their caps glowing faintly with bioluminescence. The forest floor rippled with soft light, like the sea seen through a prism. No sun, no wind, only the hum of unseen life and the soft pulse of energy from deep within the jungle's heart. His custom scanner had locked onto it, a unique complex signal oscillating in unnatural rhythms. That kind of energy signature meant one of two things: either a failed alien experiment waiting to detonate, or a relic of immense power. Either way, it was valuable. Louie brought the ship down into a natural clearing, a circle carved centuries ago by something long gone. Vines had begun to reclaim the land, but the clearing was still open enough to land. He geared up fast plasma. Rifle, high-density boots, sensor visor, a few days' rations. Every piece of gear clipped and locked in with practiced ease. He moved like a machine, but his eyes never stopped scanning. He stepped into the jungle and the soundscape changed immediately. Not quiet, but full of a silence that watched. The trees breathed with pale light. The air shimmered with pollen. Insects hummed in syncopated rhythms that felt too deliberate to be random. A faint breeze stirred the leaves, but there was no wind. He kept moving. His scanner pulsed stronger the deeper he went. The signal was pure, persistent, impossible. Hours passed beneath the alien canopy, time marked only by the shift in moss colors beneath his boots and the rising hum of energy in the air. Then he saw it. The temple stood half submerged in the jungle, its walls carved from a dark stone that shimmered faintly under the twilight. Roots wrapped around it like the skeletal hands of the forest, and across its facade webs. Massive, shimmering webs strung between pillars and stone spires. They looked ancient, draped in moss and dew, but intact. Not the work of mindless insects. No torn strands. No chaos. They had been placed with precision. Louie raised his rifle slightly. Just enough. He stepped closer. His boots made no sound on the stone. His breath remained shallow, controlled. The scanner in his hand pinged once, then went dead. Static washed across the screen. He didn't speak, didn't curse. Just kept moving. Inside the temple, the air was still and dense. Cold, despite the humidity outside. Statues lined the corridor, shapes draped in webbing, their features hidden beneath silky shrouds. The energy signature was strongest here. So strong it made the walls throb faintly beneath his gloves. He reached for a light stick, cracked it once. The green glow spilled forward, revealing more of the chamber. Pillars stretched into the high ceiling, where shadows refused to lift. Then he felt it. Not a sound, not a shape, something primal. A vibration. Barely there. He paused, instincts flaring. The air moved wrong above him, too slow, too deliberate. The shadows high overhead weren't still. They shifted slowly, methodically. He was not alone. The moment Louie stepped past the first set of web-draped pillars, the silence shifted. It wasn't broken. It was deepened, like a breath being held just beneath the skin of the world. He didn't flinch, but every nerve in his body coiled tighter, tuned to frequencies most men never lived long enough to learn. The temple felt wrong, not in the way of crumbling ruins or unstable ground, but alive, not welcoming, not hostile, waiting. He moved further inside, one slow step at a time, the beam of his cracked glow stick throwing green arcs of light across the cavernous chamber. Massive strands of spider silk crisscrossed the air above, beautiful, geometric, and aged without fragility. Louie had seen webs like this before on derelict planets infested by mindless crawler beasts, but nothing like this. These strands were arranged with intention, calculated, deliberate. Each strand was placed as if meant to mean something, as if they told a story no one had lived long enough to hear. The energy signal surged through his visor again, briefly rebooting the scanner before frying it in a burst of light. Static fizzled across his screen, then silence. Gone. Dead tech in his hand, and something else stirring just above. He reached instinctively for his rifle, but before his hand touched the grip, the floor beneath him moved, not down. Up. A flash. A shriek of metal and pressure. The platform beneath his boots exploded into motion as a net of pure tensile fiber, unseen until now, launched from the stone like a triggered spring trap. He didn't scream, he never did, but the air vanished from his lungs as he was yanked 10 feet into the air and slammed against a wall of sticky, shimmering silk. The world twisted sideways. His rifle clattered far below. His legs kicked once before being pinned. His arms were crushed to his sides by a cocoon of web so strong it flexed without breaking. Each breath felt tighter than the last. The silk moved with him, responded to him, adapted. For the first time in a long time, Louie felt fear, not fear of dying. Fear of not understanding. Then it came. The clicking. Not mechanical, organic, rhythmic. A language, maybe. A warning, definitely. He craned his neck, veins straining against the pull of the web, and saw her. Descending silently, limbs poised in fluid symmetry, a creature emerged from the shadows of the temple's dome. 6 legs moved with perfect grace. Long, midnight purple exoskeleton limbs tipped in silken claws. A humanoid torso, glistening in soft light. Thick, white hair cascading like woven thread down her back. 8 eyes, arranged in perfect symmetry, pulsed with a soft internal glow as she watched him with calm, predatory intelligence. Not a beast. Someone. She landed on the floor beneath him with no sound, just a slow tilt of her head. She took one step closer. The web around Louie tightened. His mind snapped into combat gear. He strained against the silk, searching for leverage. None. His knife was too far under his pinned vest. His arms might as well have been stone. Her voice didn't come from her mouth. It came through his patching through frequencies she shouldn't have had access to. It was layered, half synthesized, half natural, like a whisper echoed through crystal and chitin. You fight it, she said. Good. Most scream until their lungs collapse. Her words weren't mocking. They were observant, curious. She approached with slow, graceful movements. Her hand reached out not for his throat, but for the silk over his chest. She tapped. It once, gently. The strand vibrated with a pulse that made his teeth buzz. Her eyes locked onto his. There was no malice, just tiredness. I spun this for someone who would survive it, she said. I have waited a long time. The words hit. Like a bullet, Louie froze. Something inside him went quiet. Not from confusion, but because some part of him understood. With one flick of her wrist, a claw slid from her exoskeleton like a blade unsheathed in silence. Before he could brace, she cut the anchor thread holding him aloft. The world dropped beneath him. He hit the stone floor hard. The wind knocked clean from his chest. He rolled fast, grabbed for his thigh pistol, brought it up, then stopped. She hadn't moved. She stood in the same place, watching, calm, open, no aggression. Just patience. Her voice returned, softer now. "You were sent here by them," she said. "The ones who burn. The ones who eat through silence and leave only metal." Louie blinked. He knew who she meant. The SCRAPPERS. She gestured once, and the temple lights shifted. A side wall shimmered into focus, revealing the corpses, 12 of them, cocooned in dried silk, frozen in agony, still wearing their scavenger armor, blackened from plasma fire. They tried to take the hearthstone. They didn't ask. They didn't understand. Louie didn't reply. His mind was catching up, racing to piece the angles. He was bait. He had been hired to scout, to get in, report back, and let the scrappers come finish the job. He had been played. Sabina, he didn't know her name, yet turned her back on him. A gesture that screamed trust in a place like this. "Come," she sighed. "I will show you why you were spared, and why you must choose." He hesitated. Then he picked up his rifle, eyes never leaving her silhouette, and followed her into the heart of the temple. The corridor narrowed as they walked, twisting deeper into the bones of the temple like a ribcage closing behind them. Louie followed in silence, his boots whispering over the stone, his weapon lowered but ready. The air grew colder, the walls alive with etched veins of pale golden energy that pulsed faintly like breath. He had seen temples. He had breached vaults. But never had a structure felt like it was breathing with him. The alien woman, Sabina, he would soon learn, moved ahead with fluid precision. Her 6 limbs carried her effortlessly across the sloping corridor, sometimes crawling along the wall or upside down across the ceiling like a shadow stitched into the stone. Her every movement was graceful, controlled, deliberate. The more he watched her, the more he understood this place wasn't just her home. She was part of it. "Who are you?" Louie finally asked, voice low. She didn't turn. "The last of my kind." The words carried no drama, just finality. Like a tombstone carved in living crystal, the corridor opened without warning into a colossal chamber, oval in shape, easily 100 feet across. A massive translucent crystal hovered in the center, suspended in midair by threads of energy that arced like webbing from the walls, floor, and ceiling. It pulsed softly with light and rhythm, and the very air around it shimmered with heatless brilliance. Louie froze. The HEARTHSTON. It wasn't a relic. It wasn't even technology in the traditional sense. It was something else entirely alive. The scanner hadn't lied. No wonder it had burned out. This thing radiated a frequency beyond conventional physics. He could feel it not just in the scanner, not just in the atmosphere, but deep in his chest. A thrum behind the ribs. A call. Without words. "This is what they want," Sabina said quietly, stepping up to the crystal. She did not touch it. "But they do not understand it. They never tried. They only tear. They only consume." Louie took a cautious step forward, eyes locked on the hearthstone. "What is it?" "It is the heart of Silkshade," she answered. "It sustains the jungle. It regulates climate. It channels memory. It holds the final stories of my people. It is both light and memory, power and presence." Louie circled the edge of the platform slowly, absorbing it all, the architecture, the perfect symmetry, the sheer quiet gravity of it. "So what am I doing here?" Sabina finally turned to him. Her 8 eyes narrowed. The web was not meant to kill. It was meant to find you, the one who would not panic, the one who would not scream, the one who would hesitate before destroying. He snorted softly. And what if I had shot you instead of followed? Her head tilted. You didn't. That answer silenced him more than it should have. Then she moved to the far side of the chamber. A gentle wave of her hand and the wall melted away into visibility, an illusion cast by the temple. Beyond it, darkness. Not just shadow-burnt stone, melted carvings, and death. Louie stepped forward and his stomach twisted. Dozens of cocoons, some split open, others slashed down the middle hung like grim trophies from blackened pillars. Weapons and armor lay scattered across the floor. Scorch marks from plasma burns scarred the walls. And underneath it all, the stink of burnt circuitry and rot. He moved closer and kicked over a piece of armor. The symbol was familiar. A jagged gear fused with a bone sigil. Scrappers. Louie had dealt with their kind, cybernetic raiders. Ruthless, efficient, driven by credits and controlled chaos. They salvaged entire civilizations one tomb at a time. Always pushing, never asking. If they couldn't use it, they broke it. They tried to hijack the Hearthstone, Sabina said, voice low. They brought a viral frequency generator. Thought they could overclock it, bleed it raw. But it would have destroyed the crystal. And the planet, Louie exhaled. They didn't want the stone. They wanted to burn it into a fuel core, Sabina nodded. They failed, but they will return. Louie stepped back, piecing it all together. The encrypted client. The absurd. Payout, the silence after confirmation. They hired me, he said, more to himself than to her. They used me. Sent me in first to confirm the location. I was the scout. Were, Sabina corrected. Now you are the variable they did. Not predict. He looked at her, eyes narrowing. And you think I'm going to stay and help you fight off a warband of butchers? She stared at him without blinking. No, I know you're going to decide that on your own. The quiet that followed wasn't hostile. It was vast. Louie walked to the hearthstone and stared into it. For a heartbeat, he saw something impossible reflections. Not of his face, but of his choices. Images of ruins, regrets, empty starships, long nights without anyone to call. What happens if they crack it? He asked. Sabina's answer was immediate. Silkshade dies. The jungle withers. The temple crumbles. The last breath of the Arani is lost forever. Louie closed his eyes, and in the silence, the hearthstone pulsed again like it was waiting too. The jungle didn't sleep, even at the temple's edge. Where ancient stone bled into moss-covered forest, the air thrummed with life. Distant cries echoed through the towering bioluminescent canopy, and every leaf, every vine seemed to breathe, in rhythm with the world. But Louie no longer saw Silkshade as a wilderness. He saw it as something else now, a living system, a cradle, a battlefield, and he was no longer a visitor. He stood just outside the temple's grand archway, sharpening the edge of a combat blade with practiced rhythm. Each stroke against the stone sparked faintly in the violet dusk. His visor blinked. With readouts from his portable sensor grid, now fully deployed around the temple perimeter. 32 motion detectors. 6 proximity alarms. 4 thermal traps. He had turned a sacred ruin into a war nest. Sabina watched from above, crouched on a web that spanned the temple's upper terrace like a silver canopy. Her eyes scanned the treetops while her silk thread fingers spun something. Knew a lattice of tension lines that connected the jungle to the ancient spires. Her method was unlike anything Louie had ever seen. She didn't prepare for battle with bullets or walls. She wove strategy into reality. Louie looked up at her. You realize I could hold this place with a few drone turrets and a well-placed ambush line. Sabina didn't pause her weaving. And you'd scorch the jungle doing it. Better charred ground than no ground. No, she said simply. Better a caught enemy than a dead one. Better a memory preserved than forgotten in fire. Louie scoffed but didn't argue. Not because he agreed, but because he respected the resolve in her voice. It wasn't idealism. It was ancient wisdom, the kind that came from watching centuries pass like drifting dust. The trap lines were nearly finished. Louie checked his readouts again. They'd positioned themselves into a simple but brutal configuration. His kinetic defenses would funnel the enemy through narrow jungle trails, and Sabina's webs would separate, isolate, and disable. "You've done this before?" he asked. "Against the scrappers?" she replied. "Only once. They sent 6. Louie raised an eyebrow. "And?" She looked down, and for the first time there was no cryptic softness in her voice. None of them left this world. He believed her. Later, as twilight deepened, they sat atop a broken pillar overlooking the expanse of Silkshade's jungle. It glowed with a gentle pulse, speckled with drifting pollen and soft, organic light. Louie removed one glove and ran, his fingers through the air, feeling the warmth of the jungle's breath. Sabina sat beside him, silent but near. "You waited centuries," he said, his voice low. "What did you think would happen? When the prophecy came true?" She was quiet for a long moment. "Then I thought I'd be dead, or forgotten, or that the warrior would come too late." Louie tilted his head toward her. "And now?" She turned her eyes to him, 8 glowing orbs reflecting the jungle, the stars, and maybe something more. "Now I think the web held." They didn't speak. Again for a while, but not all quiet as peace. Without warning, Louie's visor blinked red. His hand snapped to the datapad. Motion. North approach. Fast. Heavy. Sabina was already moving, her limbs unfurling with terrifying grace. She scurried across her high web, tightening lines, adjusting tension, reweaving points in midair. Louie activated the sensor array. Red dots. 12. No 15. Then 20. The scrappers weren't probing. They were rushing. He moved back inside the temple, his boots pounding against the stone as he called up the defense plan. His rifle buzzed in his grip. Sabina's voice echoed from above. "They're cutting straight through. No caution." "Of course not," Louie muttered. "They think no one's watching." The first explosion came from the outer jungle. Proximity mine that sent fire and soil into the air. A metallic scream followed, then radio static filled with garbled orders. The scrappers had arrived. Louie climbed the temple's central causeway, taking his position on a high ledge that overlooked the entire entrance. Below, webs shimmered in the air, stretched across pillars and wrapped around stone spires like traps set by a god. Sabina hung from the center beam, her limbs still. "This is where we make them stop," she said. Louie nodded. "This is where we make them pay." Then the jungle burst open and the first scrapper came into view. 8 feet tall, wrapped in cybernetic armor, eyes glowing with artificial malice. Plasma buzzed on his forearm. He stepped into the clearing and vanished into Sabina's waiting web. The jungle screamed, not in sound, but in chaos. The bioluminescent canopy flared wildly as the first scrapper was yanked into the air, his plasma arm firing wildly as silk strands constricted around his limbs. He held mechanically distorted, more machine than man before the neurotoxin in Sabina's web shut down his nervous system. His body went limp, eyes still blinking behind reinforced goggles. Louie didn't wait for silence. He pulled the trigger. A plasma bolt lanced through the air, striking a second scrapper in the upper chest and sending him tumbling backward into a sprawl of glowing fungi. 2 more rushed forward, undeterred, plasma saws revving on their wrists, shoulder-mounted cannons scanning for targets. He was already repositioning. From his elevated position in the upper gallery, Louie ducked behind a carved pillar, reloading with muscle memory. The sound of his breathing was drowned by the howl of energy. Weapons tearing through the jungle below. Sabina danced above the battlefield, an elegant terror. She moved like shadow and silk, diving from perch to perch, laying new threads even, as she yanked enemies into carefully set traps. She never wasted a motion. Her 6 limbs worked in unison, wrapping, binding, pulling. Her webbing reacted with intelligence, tightening only when tension shifted, rippling with encoded vibration signatures she alone understood. Louie watched her intercept a cybernetic brute as it charged the temple's side entrance, her silk wrapped the invader's legs mid-sprint. The thing stumbled, rolled, right into an immobilizing net suspended between 2 root-covered obelisks. By the time it screamed, she was already above it, slashing through power joints with 2 claws in a blur. Another. Motion alert pinged his HUD, a scrapper sniper on the western ridge. Louie turned, exhaled, fired his bolt sliced clean through the stalk of a towering fungal tree, sending the massive cap crashing down on the shooter's position. But then everything shifted. The jungle dimmed, as if Silkshade itself sensed what came next. The scrapper leader stepped into the clearing. He was colossal, nearly 10 feet tall, clad in mismatched armor plates scavenged from a dozen wars. His spine was lined with exposed coils, his skull partially reinforced with alloy. In one hand he carried a plasma cannon the size of a small engine. The other was a brute force hammer designed for zero atmosphere. Boarding operations. Louie fired. The bolt struck center mass and fizzled. The leader didn't flinch. He raised his cannon and returned fire. The blast struck the balcony where Louie had stood seconds before, vaporizing it in a flash of molten stone and spraying shards across the temple. Louie rolled hard, hit the ground below, and landed in a crouch as the air rippled from the impact. Sabina's web shimmered and then began to burn. The leader had triggered a plasma mesh flare, a weapon designed to superheat atmosphere and reduce organic material to ash. Her threads shriveled and snapped like breaking glass. She screamed, not in fear, but in rage. The sound was alien, furious, a sound no human throat could ever produce. Louie scrambled back behind the inner archway as the leader's guards advanced, 2 shielded hulks bristling with micro-turrets and drone pods. They moved in perfect sync, their energy shields flaring as they absorbed Louie's next volley. Sabina dropped from the ceiling between them, slicing one guard's drone array in half with her claws. But the second grabbed her mid-spin and hurled her into a column with a sound like breaking bone. Louie's heart leapt as she hit the ground and didn't move. He sprinted, sliding across stone. He dropped a cluster grenade behind him, catching one of the guards in the blast and sending it flying into a spider-webbed wall. It stuck. It screamed. The silk ignited from residual plasma and consumed it in seconds. The leader didn't care. He was already approaching the inner sanctum. Louie skidded to a stop beside Sabina's unmoving form. "Come on," he whispered, shaking her shoulder. "Get up. You've lived too long to go out like this." Her eyes flickered. She groaned, her thorax cracked but healing. "He'll breach the chamber," she hissed. "You must stop him." "No." Louie growled. "We will." They staggered to their feet together as the leader reached the hearthstone chamber. The massive crystal pulsed erratically, now red veins of unstable energy, spiraling across its surface. He placed something beside it. Louie recognized it instantly. A viral frequency resonator, impossibly old tech, but optimized. It had one purpose: forcefully override organic harmonics. It would destroy the hearthstone from within. Not an explosion, not a theft, a corruption. Sabina's voice was barely audible. "If it activates ... the jungle dies, Silkshade shatters. My people's memory ends." The leader turned, grinning. Doesn't need to survive. It just needs to scream before it burns. Louie raised his rifle. The leader fired first. The world turned to fire and ash. Louie woke moments later, ears ringing, vision doubled. The chamber was cracking. The hearthstone pulsed wildly, emitting sharp notes of feedback that rattled his skull. Sabina lay beside him, struggling to rise, and the device was humming, charging for activation. Louie crawled forward. He had one. Grenade left. Not enough. Then Sabina grabbed his arm. There is one way, she said, her voice urgent, but it's not safe. He looked at her, at the desperation in her eyes, at the fire around them, and he said, do it. The floor cracked beneath him as the hearthstone screamed. It was not a sound made of voice or vibration, it was a psychic howl, a shattering pulse that echoed through bone and memory alike. Louie clutched his head, teeth bared in agony as his thoughts blurred, unraveling like cloth torn by wind. The viral frequency device beside the crystal glowed brighter, its spires unfolding like claws, feeding the chaos it had triggered. The energy field around the hearthstone writhed like a wounded animal. Sabina was beside him now, eyes wide with luminous panic, not fear for herself, but for the soul of her world. Her voice, usually calm and low, now snapped like fire. We don't have time. I told you there was a final part to the prophecy. I didn't believe it would ever matter. But now we have to try. Louie forced himself upright, his joints aching, body trembling under the pressure that filled the air. The hearthstone's pulse was no longer gentle, it was erratic. Frenzied, dying, what part? He shouted over the rising psychic noise. She looked at him, no riddles now. No poetry, just raw truth. It was never meant to be protected by one alone. The hearthstone is too powerful, too old. Its purpose was to be shared, to be balanced. That's what the Arani believed, that a guardian would hold it in body, but it would only stabilize when merged with a mind that had never belonged to this world. Louie stared at her, stunned. You mean me? Yes, she said. But not just you standing here. Not as. You are. We have to join. Not flesh, mind, consciousness. A full merge. If we can form the link, we can rewrite the crystal's harmonics, purge the corruption, restore its harmony. He blinked rapidly, reeling. And if we fail? Sabina didn't answer. She didn't need to. The hearthstone cracked again this time visibly. A spiderweb fracture raced through its core, bleeding scarlet light. The air in the room thickened, compressing as if the planet itself held its breath. He could feel the end pressing against his skin. He looked at her. She extended one clawed hand, not as a weapon, but as a bridge. Trust me. One more time. And he did. Their hands met on the HEARTHSTONE. The crystal flared blinding white. Then everything stopped. Not silence. Stillness. Louie stood in a void of endless woven light. No floor. No ceiling. Just threads of memory stretching into infinity. Each strand hummed with meaning, echoes of thought, sensation, emotion. And at the center, Sabina. Not just her body. Her essence. He saw her, not the alien warrior, not the elegant killer, but the soul of a species long gone. A youngling weaving her first song into silk. A daughter clinging to a dying elder. A sentinel watching centuries pass and motionless. Silence. He felt the grief. The crushing, patient weight of isolation. And beneath it all, the hope tiny, flickering that one day someone might come. And she saw him, his wandering, his endless chase through derelict ruins and forgotten worlds. His talent, yes, but also the emptiness, the loss, the loneliness he buried beneath sarcasm and systems checks. The part of him that stopped dreaming long ago. Their minds didn't. Speak. They intertwined. His strength became her anchor. Her memory became his map. The merge wasn't violent. It was truthful. Their barriers dissolved, but nothing was lost. Instead, everything was shared. And the hearthstone responded. The red light vanished. The fractures sealed in reverse. The scream turned into song. In the physical realm, a wave of harmonic light burst from the crystal, surging outward like a cleansing storm. The viral device disintegrated in a puff of dust. The scrapper leader, still powering his cannon, screamed as his cybernetic implants overloaded and exploded in flashes of white-hot energy. He dropped to his knees, his chest plate sparking, before collapsing in a silent heap. The remaining invaders throughout the jungle froze, systems shutting down in synchronized pulses, their synthetic minds silenced by the overwhelming purity of the hearthstone's release. And then stillness returned. But it wasn't the stillness of death. It was peace, resonance, the calm hum of life realigned. Louie collapsed to his knees beside the crystal. His body was his again, but different. The ache in his bones had gone. His thoughts were clearer than they had ever been, and even though Sabina stood across from him now, her hand still on the hearthstone, he could feel her inside him, not as a voice, not as an echo, but as a presence. She looked at him, breathing heavily, her eyes dimmed to a soft glow. "It worked," she said softly. He nodded, unable to speak. "You saw me," she whispered, "all of me." "And you saw me," he replied. There were no walls between them now, no barriers. They had crossed a line that most beings couldn't even comprehend. He stood slowly, reached out, and this time when his hand touched her exoskeletal cheek, it was not alien. It was familiar. Around them, the hearthstone pulsed gently like the heart of a healed world. The temple stood in reverent silence, not the silence of absence, but of balance, a world holding its breath in peaceful exhale. Outside, the jungle glowed like a breathing sea of light, the bioluminescent canopy slowly pulsing in tune with the PM, the hearthstone's heartbeat. The damage left by the scrappers, the burns, the broken stone, the poisoned threads was already beginning to fade, not by magic, not by miracle, but by the will of a world once broken and now waking. Louie stood at the threshold of the hearthstone chamber, his body still aching from the mind merge, though it wasn't pain exactly. It was like the soreness that follows being remade. He flexed his fingers, testing the strange harmony that still lingered within him. Not just thoughts, but threads, connections. He could feel the temple, hear the faint hum of the crystal deep in his chest. He could even feel Sabina somewhere behind him, her presence like a quiet pressure beneath his skin, not invasive, not overwhelming, just there like a memory that would never leave. He turned and found her already watching. She stood taller now, straighter, her wounds healed, her limbs smooth and poised once more. But something had changed, not her form, her face. There was no tension behind her 8 glowing eyes, no centuries of fatigue holding her back, just focus and something deeper, something warm. "We survived," Louie said softly. "No." Sabina corrected gently as she stepped toward him. "We began." They spent the next hours, maybe days, working in silence. The scrappers' bodies were removed from the inner sanctum and wrapped in neutralizing silk. Sabina wove each cocoon with a specific frequency that accelerated decomposition while sealing toxic synthetic elements. Louie hauled the broken tech into a stone pit that once held water and ignited it with a plasma charge. Blue flame danced. For hours, smoke trailing into the twilight like the ghosts of 1,000 desecrated worlds finally put to rest. They rebuilt what they could. Webs were restrung across collapsed bridges. Stone walls were fused together with a bonding paste derived from crushed fungus and Sabina's adhesive silk. Louie, never much for aesthetics, found himself asking Sabina's opinion before replacing even a single carving. Not because he needed approval, but because he wanted to learn. In those quiet hours, they didn't speak much. They didn't need to. When the work was done, they returned to the balcony high above the temple. The view stretched endlessly, a sea of soft, glowing green and purple beneath a sky that shimmered with aurora-like sheets of light. Louie stood beside her, still holding his helmet in one hand, unsure what to say now that the fight was over. His entire life had been built on the next mission, the next relic, the next job, but for once, there was no next. Only here. Sabina moved beside him, her tall, alien form graceful in its stillness. "You were meant to leave," she said without turning. "You were never meant to stay." Louie looked down at the jungle. "Maybe, but maybe what I was before wasn't meant to continue." He looked at the comms device clipped to his belt. The signal light blinked, a final pulse from the outside galaxy. No doubt from the scrapper syndicate that had hired him. They'd wonder why their scout never reported, why their strike team never returned. He took the device in hand, stared at it for a long moment, and crushed it. Plastic and metal cracked in his grip. Sparks died against the stone. He dropped the rune pieces into the wind and never looked back. Sabina turned now, her expression unreadable to anyone who hadn't seen her soul. But Louie had. He understood the shift in her gaze. Not suspicion, not caution, just uncertainty. "You sure?" she asked. "No," he said, "but I'm staying anyway." She stepped closer, her movement slow, deliberate. Her hand-clawed, alien, familiar rested against his chest. "You've woven into me," she said. "You realize that?" Louie smiled faintly. "Yeah, and I think you've wrapped around me too." For a moment, neither moved. Then she leaned forward, her head tilting just enough to bring her strange, beautiful face close to his. He didn't flinch. He didn't question. He met her halfway. Their lips met, soft and strange and perfect. The kiss a seal on something far deeper than any contract or creed. It wasn't lust. It wasn't impulse. It was recognition. A final thread binding two once lonely souls into something whole. When they parted, the jungle breathed in harmony. And far beneath them, deep in the ancient veins of the hearthstone, two new patterns shimmered in the light woven into the very core. One was silk, the other steel. Together they hummed, not an ending, beginning.